She said, consensus is the death of leadership. Leadership is a strong leader stepping forward and moving the issue in the direction that he or she knows that we need to move in, and being able to persuade other members of your team that that is the North Star goal that we all need to be behind. And so Margaret Thatcher, probably number one, Jack Kemp, number two.
Thanks, Peter. 1 minute for your answer on this question. In what specific ways would you help to support and unite the Republican Party in this district?
I would build on my experience as a leader of our party over the last 2 decades in the Missouri Senate, winning our majority seat by seat. It was frustrating, often 1 step forward, 2 steps back, but recognizing that a candidate who can win the district in Shannon County or Reynolds County might not be the same as a candidate who can win a seat in Jefferson County, or I used to have the whole state to think of when I was Senate President Pro Tem, and I think of winning a seat for a Republican in Ladue and other parts of St. Louis County, and that was not like winning a seat in Southwest Missouri. So I have broad experience in team building, in unifying our party and all aspects of our conservative movement, including my Libertarian and Ron Paul friends and my Tea Party friends who I welcomed so warmly into the Republican majority coalition.
All right, Peter, 2 minutes for this answer. Given the 8th District's vulnerability to natural disasters, what will your approach be to funding for FEMA and the Army Corps of Engineers with the current budget crisis?
Well, I take a tough look at those budgets, but obviously those are core functions of the federal government that we need to have ready and at the ready for any natural disaster or man-made disaster that comes our way. I've been involved in fighting floods. I was in the McBride Bottom on that morning in the summer of 1993 when the levee broke. I watched that heartbreaking scene. I've been involved in flood fights then and since. As acting governor, I called out the National Guard to fight a flood back in about 2007. So I have quite a bit of hands-on experience here, and we've got to make sure that the Corps of Engineers has the resources they need, but we also have to make certain that we have the attention of the Army Corps of Engineers when they undertake to cause a man-made catastrophe and blow up the levee down in Mississippi County, an event they've done twice, in 1937 and last year. I want to make sure that there's accountability built into their budget and that they're listening to us and listening to the producers, the agribusiness producers, who depend on that fertile ground and all our natural resources in the 8th District.
2 minutes for this answer as well. What is your position on reauthorizing the 2008 Farm Bill, which expired September 30th, 2012?
I believe there should be a farm bill. The fact that there isn't is a failure of this Congress. I am not schooled in the individual details of this farm bill, and I won't tell you that I am when I'm not. I would rely, as Bill Emerson, my boss, did in the 80s and 90s, on the wisdom of people in this room and the wisdom of the people at the Farm Bureau who advised him and with whom I've worked and been endorsed by in all my campaigns. But the fact that our current U.S. Congress cannot produce a farm bill is a terrific indictment, an awful indictment of the dysfunction that is now reigning in Washington, D.C. And I would go to work to try to remedy that dysfunction and plead with our, and bargain with our co-equal branch in the United States Senate to produce a farm bill for sure.
Again, 2 minutes for your answer. How would you support economic development in our 8th District?
I would do it with the Emerson example in mind. I can tell you as a boy growing up here in southeast Missouri, we didn't have much communication in those days with our friends down in Springfield or even on the western end of this district. Why? Because Highway 60 was a winding pig path from here to Springfield, and it took you 5 hours to go from Cape Girardeau to Springfield. Bill Emerson rolled up his sleeves with United States Senator Kit Bond, and Bill passed the torch to Joanne in 1996, and they did the hard work that completed Highway 60 as one of the finest new highways in the country. that I travel all the time, and that many of you travel to get over here today, is the 4-lane highway that it is, and our infrastructure of that kind is the lifeblood of our economy. Our timber producers, our agribusiness producers of all kinds. I've been active in the Southeast Missouri Regional Port Authority and helping all our ports up and down the Mississippi River. Before I went to Jefferson City in the Senate, I sat for 6 years on the SEMO Port Board. We have one of the finest ports out here on the Cape-Scott County line that is a joint cooperative deal between Cape and Scott counties. I led the effort to pass the sales tax back in 1985. We said it would be on for 4 years and go off, and we kept our word. The tax was voted by the people, it was on for 4 years, and it went off. So I have a long history of fighting for our infrastructure needs to get product to market.
This is your final question. You have 1 minute to answer. Washington seems to be in gridlock. When, if ever, do you feel it's appropriate to compromise?
Here's my view that I told Bob Holden when I was, is this a 1 minute or 2?
This is 1 minute.
Okay, I told Bob Holden 12 years ago this month, he was coming in as governor. I said, I was newly elected Senate president. I had a 1-seat majority. I had a head full of blonde hair then, too. I had a 1-seat majority, and the Democrats still had a huge majority in the House. And I told Governor Holden, I said, the elections are over. I'm a fierce competitor at election time. The people expect us to work together. Where I can, I will work together with you. Where devotion to principle and constitutional government demands it, I will not compromise. And so I have bedrock conservative principles that I will not compromise on, but when it comes to producing a budget that is reasonable, in our case balanced, at the state of Missouri, under difficult circumstances with declining state revenues, we still balance the budget. We made the tough cuts. I have a record of doing that.
You still have a head full of blonde hair.
It's blonder.
We just changed the word to platinum. You're okay. All right. You now have 1.5 minutes, Peter, for your closing statement when you're ready.
Thank you, Fawn. I'm here, my fellow conservatives, my fellow Southern Missourians, to humbly lay my case before you. As I said in my opening remarks, I have a record of accomplishment. I have a record of achievement. I have a record of results for our district, and I have a record that I believe demonstrates beyond any doubt that this state is a more conservative state because I was in the fight in Jefferson City. I did not go up there to warm a seat. I went up there in the winter of 1993, very much in the minority at a time when Republicans were in the permanent minority for 4+ decades. I went there to change the course of events in our state, to move our state in a more conservative direction. And that, ladies and gentlemen, I have done. That is the results-oriented, team-building approach of conservative leadership for results for our state that I will take as I fight for you in Washington, D.C., should you be so kind as to honor me with this nomination. I will stand with you to build the Republican Party in your courthouses. I would like to live to see the day when St. Genevieve, a county as Democrat as St. Genevieve, has as many Republicans as Perry County, or Wright County, or Douglas County in the courthouse. And you know that I'll be there for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Our next candidate is John Terrell, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Trying to go from what you said in your opening statement. All right, John, I will tell you how long you have for each question before I pose it, and we will have Scott let you know when you have just a few seconds left, okay?
Thank you.
Your first question, you have 1 minute to answer. Which political leader from the past 50 years, besides Ronald Reagan, do you see as a role model?
The political leader I see as a leader would probably be Bush 41, Herbert Walker Bush. And the thing I liked about him was he made tough decisions. And when he had to make a tough decision, yet he stood by them. And I appreciate that about him, because that's the one thing I want to do, is I understand this job is going to require tough decisions, And I will make those decisions, and I will stand by them. They might not be popular, because sometimes you have to make an unpopular decision. But if it's the right decision, I believe it's the right decision, and you tell me it's the right decision, I'll do it.
Okay, thank you. You have 1 minute for this answer, if you would please, John. In what specific ways would you help to support and unite the Republican Party in this district?
The one thing I've noticed in this process is that this party has some different ideas, and those individuals have different ideas. Those different ideas and the beliefs of those have split our party, and what I want to do is a very simple thing. I want to come out and talk to you. I want to bring you all together and talk to you and find out where our differences are and what our similarities are, and we're going to work together and get through those, because we have to unite. We are split, and the more divided we are, the more we're going to fall, and that has to stop. And I want to work with you to become a unified party.
Okay, 2 minutes for this answer. Given the 8th District's vulnerability to natural disasters, what would your approach be to funding for FEMA and the Army Corps of Engineers with our current budget crisis?
Well, in this race, the budget is our main concern here. And I think my policy with FEMA and natural disaster essentially goes to this, is that the government should do for the people what the people cannot do for themselves. And if there's a crisis, like a flooding over here in the eastern side of the state, or a tornado on my side of the state, even tornadoes down here, I think the government needs to step in to help people get back on their feet. I believe in a hand up, not a handout.
Okay. 2 minutes for this answer. What is your position on reauthorizing the 2008 Farm Bill, which did expire September 30th, 2012? And please be specific.
Yes. I grew up on a dairy farm, milk cows, and I understand the Farm Bill is important, especially important to you folks. On the eastern side of the state, a lot of crops over here. On my side, we do a lot of cattle. What I would do is simple. Go to each and every one of those rascals up there and tell them, we need a Farm Bill, we need it now. They need to understand that this country was built on farming. And farming is important. It's important to everybody because we feed the world. And if we're not able to do that because the people in Washington cannot unite to pass a farm bill that allow us to do our jobs, then we're going to fail. And so I feel that my strategy would be to go up there, talk to them each individually, and advise them how important it is that we get this done.
2 minutes for this answer as well. How would you support economic development in our 8th District?
I had a very interesting drive. I'm from the western side of the district, and I took Highway 60, and that essentially just runs from the western side to the eastern side. And the thing I noticed is that we have some counties that struggle economically. And what I want to do is simple. I want to get on the ground, go to companies and ask them, what can I do to help you come to our district and set up shop, offer jobs, and put some people to work, because we have good, hard-working people. We have people in the 8th District who value hard work, honest pay, and I think we need some companies to come here to allow you guys that opportunity to do that.
Okay. This is your final question. You will have 1 minute to answer. Washington does appear to be in gridlock. When, if ever, do you feel it's appropriate to compromise?
As an attorney, I spend a lot of time compromising. But understand this, you have to have a person who's willing to negotiate in good faith basis. We do not have that with the president. And so what we have to do is stand our ground until he understands that what we're trying to do is for the betterment of the country. The debt ceiling is coming. Well, that's going to be an open discussion. The problem is spending. They want to raise it, we want to fix it. Here's how we do it. Let's balance the budget. You want to raise the debt ceiling, you give us a balanced budget amendment. That's how you fix that. They are more interested in protecting their jobs than they are in helping you find a job. And I disagree with that. If I'm selected this thing as your congressman, I may only be up there for 1.5 years, 2 years, because they may run me out. I'm there for a purpose. I'm not there to impose my will on you. I'm there to do your will. And if they don't like it, too bad, because I'm responsible to you.
All right, John. You now have 1.5 minutes for your closing statement when you're ready.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I really enjoyed coming here. You're a great bunch of people. And the thing that jumps out at me is pride. I have a lot of pride in this country, but I don't know if our country has a lot of pride in itself. And I'm worried about that. We're going from a nation of can'ts and won'ts from, we used to be cans and wills. Now, I don't know where that happened at, but it needs to stop. I believe that this country is the greatest country on earth, and we need to show that to the world. We need to show it to ourselves. We are becoming a society that's dependent upon entitlements. The hard day's work and honest pay is taboo. What can you give me as opposed to what can I do for you is the new norm. I disagree with that. I'm a person who wants to represent you. I want to do what you want me to do. We may disagree about some things, but that's fine because you win. I lose. If you don't want me to do something, I'm not going to do it. If there is disagreement amongst you, I'll do my best to talk to each and every one of you the best I can to figure out how we can reconcile that difference and do what's best for the 8th Congressional. And that's what I want to do. I want to be your advocate. I want to be your fighter, and I know I can do it.
Thank you, John. John Terrell, everybody. Lloyd Smith will be our next candidate to take the podium. Hi, Lloyd. What we'll be doing here, I'll let you know how long you have to answer each question before I pose it, okay?
Yes, ma'am.
And he will cut you off when it's time for your answer to end.
Yes, ma'am.
You will have 1 minute for your first question, Lloyd.
Yes, ma'am.
Which political leader from the past 50 years other than Ronald Reagan would you see as a role model?
I think probably Bill Emerson. Bill was my friend. He was my mentor. We rode up and down the highways together. We sang a few songs, a few gospel songs, even though at times we thought maybe we ought to keep the windows up or we might be violating some EPA rule. He was a fighter in the Congress and he was a friend at home. He was the most genuine person I think I've ever met in politics, and he always tried to do the right thing for the right reason. There were no Democrats or Republicans when they called our office. There were constituents. They were constituents of the 8th Congressional District that he loved and that he served, and I learned so much from him that is that person for me.
Okay, thanks, Lloyd. 1 minute for this answer, if you would, please. In what specific ways would you help to support and unite the Republican Party in this district?
You know, back in 1981, I sat across the desk from Bill Emerson at 339 Broadway. It was a cold February day, and he was offering me a job as his ag assistant. And I looked at him and I said, you know, Bill, what are the odds of a Republican getting elected in this place? And I said, when you're not elected, I'll be out of a job. And he said two things. I need loyalty, and let's do what's right for the folks. I think to build the Republican Party, we need to build on what we're already doing. We need to find good candidates, we need to support them, and we need to equip them with the kinds of things that they need in order to win. When we were recruiting people in the Boot Hill in that Democratic area, I'll never forget, we had to have an intervention, if you will, with Peter Myers twice. And his wife went in the other room, and someone said, what's she doing? I said, she's praying. They said, I sure hope God's a Republican.
2 minutes for this answer. Given the 8th District's vulnerability to natural disasters, what will be your approach to funding for FEMA and the Army Corps of Engineers with the current budget crisis?
You know, natural disasters best are prevented. And a lot of what the Corps of Engineers has done over the years has been helpful. Some of those things have been hurtful. There have been times when you've had to go to the Corps of Engineers and explain, like my grandmother used to say, explain to them that what they were doing was not working. I remember a time, there's a gentleman here this evening, when we were fighting to make sure that we raised the levee by about 2.5 feet. And they were explaining to us how their model showed that the water wasn't going to overtop it. And we said, well, that may be what your model's showing, but if you'll go down there and look, we're within 15 inches of overtopping a mainline levee that will put 16 feet of water on Sikeston in less than 72 hours. Sometimes you have to go and do the right thing up front to prevent natural disasters. FEMA, on the other hand, is an agency that after Katrina ran its flood insurance program so far in debt that now they're trying to reach out and put everybody in floodplains, even if they're not in floodplains. The best thing you can do with both FEMA and the Corps of Engineers is for Congress to do something they've not been doing, and that is oversight. You drag them in, you ask the tough questions. You ask them why they're making a farmer have a 404 permit to remove gravel off of his farm outside of Marble Hill, just outside of Glen Allen. Because that's the person that in truth is the landowner. And we got to make sure that we have the right regulations, but we've also got to make sure that Congress exercises oversight to stop over-regulation time and time again. FEMA is an overreach at times with what they're doing with their flood maps, and we have to hold them accountable each and every time. Congress exercising oversight will be the best remedy for FEMA and the Corps of Engineers.
2 minutes for this answer, Lloyd. What is your position on reauthorizing the 2008 Farm Bill, which expired September 30th, 2012? And please be specific.
I didn't hear the last part. The farm bill?
Yes, it expired September 30th, 2012.
You know, the original Farm Bill, and most of you in here probably know this, was started way back in about 1916. And then fast forward to the 1930s, and it was a different time and a different place. They actually set up a farm bill, and this is what it was called. The title was the Food and Security, and basically it was to protect our food supply because they thought it was a security issue for our country to be able to feed our people. Speed forward to today, we're no longer raising 65 and 75 bushel corn, except for this drought year. Sometimes we can raise 300 bushel corn, 250, 225 on irrigated ground. So what we need to do is decouple the old way of doing things with the Farm Bill, which was giving price supports and target prices and counter-cyclical payments. And we need to remove those and go back and say to the farmers, here's what we can do. We can offer a crop insurance program that's reasonable, but we're not going to send you checks for crops you don't plant. We're not going to send you counter-cyclical checks when soybeans and corn are at historical highs. So what we need to do is reevaluate the way that Food Security Act that was passed in the mid-1930s and then again in the 1940s, we need to revise it and we need to bring it into the 21st century. Farmers are risk management folks every day. They understand that, and the ones that I talk to really believe that that kind of farm bill needs to be changed from the old into the 21st century.
Okay, 2 minutes for this answer, Lloyd. How would you support economic development in the 8th District?
You know, the best thing that we can do for economic development in the 8th District, truthfully, is put predictability into the tax code and lower the deficit at the national level. Right now, there are so many small businesses that do not know what the future holds, and they're worried about over-regulation, over-taxation, and putting us in a situation where businesses are afraid to expand. And then you have Obamacare. It is probably the longest overreach of the federal government in my lifetime. And I go back a pretty good ways, as you can see with this gray hair. I want to tell you that when John Roberts voted the way he did, I thought he made probably the most gross mistake since Roe v. Wade. When his overreach basically was more interested in protecting the reputation of the Supreme Court than it was protecting the people of the country. I think the next thing that we need to do is make sure that our infrastructure in our area is into the 21st century. Our port authorities are moving more product now than ever before, both into our state and out of our state. And then I think the other thing that we have to do is look long-term at our energy policy. Just as John Kennedy said in 1960, we want to put a man on the moon inside of the decade. We can be independent of Middle East oil and secure our energy future inside of a decade. But we have got to do the right thing. We have got to use coal. We have got to drill offshore. We have got to give predictability on all of those things so our businesses can understand where the regulatory agencies are going to be, where tax policy is going to be, good infrastructure, and an energy policy that makes sense and puts America first, and it doesn't put those who give this particular administration a lot of money in the front seat.
Okay, Lloyd, this will be your final question for tonight. You have 1 minute to answer.
Yes.
Washington seems to be in gridlock. When, if ever, do you feel it's appropriate to compromise?
You know, it's interesting. Someone called the other day and they asked me about the fiscal cliff vote that happened here about 10, 12 days ago. And I said the real problem with that was we lost the high ground back in August of 2011. In 2011, we cut a deal expecting that we're going to win the White House, we're going to win the U.S. Senate, we're going to increase our numbers in the U.S. House. That's why this thing got all the way up, pushed up to 2012. I think what we need to do first and foremost is realize that we have a national debt problem. We have a problem that is so immense that we have to address it. Now, whether you go with Simpson Bowles, which had both revenue enhancers, that's taxes in Washington speak, or cutting off programs, I think at this juncture, the first thing we have to do before we increase the debt limit is have a plan to cut spending. Without cutting spending, we will never get our debt under control. The kind of compromise I'm looking for is to get the president to compromise first.
All right, Lloyd. That is it for questions, but you do have a minute and a half now for your closing statement whenever you're ready.
Ladies and gentlemen, I was raised in a small little town of East Prairie. The people on the north side of town didn't claim me because I was from Lower East Prairie. I know that's hard for you to believe. But I learned a lot from those people around me. Most of you know something else. My mother died when I was 12. There's only a few things that I ever agreed with Hillary Clinton on. The village of East Prairie really did help raise me. My church, my family, and my friends. What I want to do is go to Congress just like Bill Emerson went to Congress and do this. I want to be a fighter in Congress for you. I want to be a friend at home. I want to fight next to you on issues like the management plan of the ONSR. But folks, you can't do it all by yourself if you're a member of Congress. There's a good group out there called the Voice of the Ozarks that got together and they took on the Sierra Club. I want to lead in a way that we can make a difference in the 8th Congressional District for our future. I want to make sure that we protect our citizens by having the strongest national defense that we can possibly have. I do believe this. All of our liberties and freedom require us to have a strong national defense. I believe, as Ronald Reagan said, how much defense is enough defense? Enough to deter any would-be aggressor. To do anything less than that, I think we put our freedoms and liberty in jeopardy, both now and into the future. Thank you very much, and I appreciate your vote.
Thank you. Our next candidate is Sarah Steelman. Hi, Sarah. Hi. I'll be letting you know how long you have for each answer before I pose the question, okay? Okay, you're ready? Your first question has an answer of 1 minute, please. Which political leader from the past 50 years, other than Ronald Reagan, would you see as a role model?
That's not fair. Ronald Reagan's my man. For the past 50 years. Well, you know, I'd take William F. Buckley. Now, he wasn't, I don't know if you were limiting it to political leaders or political office holders.
I would say yes, though. Yes, a political leader, if you would.
But he certainly was a political leader, okay. William F. Buckley, and he started the conservative movement as we know it today, founding the National Review and writing about conservative thought at a time when we needed to hear it.
Okay, thank you. You have 1 minute for this answer as well, if you would. Sarah, in what specific ways would you help to support and unite the Republican Party in this district?
Well, I think that you need to get around and make sure that there's a good line of communication with all the county committees. And as a representative of the district, I'd like to go and get around to as many committee meetings as possible and to make sure that we put strong support for local candidates so that the county offices that we have are retained as Republicans and that we expand the ones that we don't have. I think the best way to do that is just to get out and help people. We need to be talking about the issues. We need to be attracting more people to our county meetings. And we need to make sure that we are expressing our views and our ideas to people who have not participated before, so that we are making our party bigger and stronger and continuing to support local and state office holders.
Thanks, Sarah. You have 2 minutes for this answer. Given the 8th District's vulnerability to natural disasters, what will be your approach to funding for FEMA and the Army Corps of Engineers with our current budget crisis?
Well, we have a huge problem on our hands in Washington with the budget crisis. And I mean, that's kind of a difficult question to answer when you don't know the specific kind of disaster that might occur. If you take, for example, the last disaster that occurred with Katrina and the bill that came up, I think it was fair for Boehner to put it on hold and say, let's look at what we have in this bill. What are we funding? It was $60 billion. Is it all going for the right kind of use in helping rebuild that area? Or is it going to, earmarks and other ridiculous projects that don't have anything to do with helping rebuild an area? Now, with respect to the Corps of Engineers, we know how important they are to keeping levees and the river and barge traffic going. I mean, I don't have a very high opinion of them personally, because I think there needs to be some serious change in the Corps of Engineers because there's a lack of accountability. So to me, the question is, we need to reform government at every level, including those two programs. And the way to do that is to put some people in Washington who are willing to say no, or to look at projects and make sure that they're cost effective, and not just vote for anything that comes down the line just because it's more money.
2 minutes for this answer, if you would please. What is your position on reauthorizing the 2008 Farm Bill, which expired September 30th of 2012? Please be specific.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question, because in the U.S. Senate race, I pondered that question quite a bit, and I looked at it, and I took a position against the Farm Bill. And here's why. It's not that I'm against farmers. I'm completely supportive of agriculture, and always have been in this state. It's the #1 industry, and we need to be sure that we protect it. There are a lot of other things we should be doing for agriculture. The Farm Bill in itself, though, is primarily the food stamp bill. And so my question is, why are we as Republicans letting people in Washington, other Republicans, hold us hostage on the Farm Bill? It should be divided. 90% of that bill is attributed to food stamps. And that's where all the costs are, not to the Farm Bill, not to programs that could actually help and provide support and a safety net for farmers. Yeah, I don't think that we can do business as usual in Washington, D.C. What we need to do is go in there and have people who are willing to say, hey, wait a minute, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm not going to be blackmailed into voting for another social program in the name of farmers. So if you're looking for somebody who's going to do that, it's not going to be me.
Thank you. 2 minutes for this answer, if you would please, Sarah. How would you support economic development in the 8th District?
Well, I think the way we first started is to get our own fiscal house into order in Washington, D.C. The whole problem right now is an economic problem. And government has a lot to do with that, and interfering in the market, creating too many regulations, creating a tax structure that's broken. So where we need to start specifically is in Washington by doing a whole list of things: fixing the budget, balancing the budget. Tax reform is needed, and I personally support lowering the rate and broadening the base. I think we need a moratorium on all rules and regulations. in Washington. Congress should pass that, go in and look at every single rule and regulation and see if it's effective, see if it's needed. If it's not, throw it out. The thing that I hear all over the 8th District and all over the state is that people are being killed by these rules and regulations and the additional cost to their businesses and the additional taxes that they have to pay and the cost of just dealing with business. And so people are either getting out of their businesses because they don't want to do it anymore, or they're not hiring the extra people because they can't afford it. And that doesn't even include healthcare. So if government would do what it's supposed to do, which starts with its own budget, meaning balance that budget, fix it, stop spending too much money, provide tax reform, get rid of rules and regulations, and really do it, not just pay lip service to it, then we would have a change in the economy. And that would help the 8th District.
Thank you. This is your last question, and it's a 1-minute answer, please. Washington seems to be in gridlock. When, if ever, do you feel it's okay to compromise?
I will not compromise on conservative principles that I believe in. I think that the gridlock idea is not necessarily accurate. I think there's a lot of things that Republicans could be doing in Washington that they're not doing. Why aren't we providing a list of cuts, specific cuts, to President Obama and saying, here's the list of cuts we want. We won't vote to raise the debt limit unless you give us these cuts. Or you could say, here's a balanced budget over 5 years. Do it. Show it to us. Do something proactive to show people and to show President Obama and the Democrats that we actually do have a plan. I think all we do is sit back and let people push us around instead of going out there and taking the initiative and getting done what needs to be done and fighting for it. You can count on me to fight for it.
Okay, Sarah, that is it for the questions, but you have 1.5 minutes for your closing statement whenever you're ready.
Well, I guess I started, my opening statement was just to talk a little bit about what I had done previously, because I thought it was important for you all to know that I have been tested under fire. And I think the best way to show that is when you do have to stand up to your own party in spite of the political consequences, and that you're willing to do that. And frankly, I think if we don't send people to Washington who have had that experience and who aren't afraid to say no and who aren't afraid to ruffle some feathers, then you're just going to get the same outcome as before. You're going to get somebody that goes up there and just votes the way they're supposed to, but doesn't do anything. Nothing changes. I won't be that person. I will make change happen. I will fight for what we believe in. We are losing our country. We are losing our freedom, and that is the most important thing. Whether it's gun rights, whether it's property rights, whether it's our future generation of kids who have to be burdened with a $50,000 debt, we're losing our freedom. Those are all of the ways the government is taking it away from us. I'm not going to let that happen. And I'm going to do whatever I can to make sure that I fight for you.
Sarah, thank you.
Thank you.